please.
Excellent, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Honorable Godaji, what a pleasure to have you over. Just hold on the slides, please, for a minute. Distinguished panelists, as introduced by Mahavir. Ladies and gentlemen, as the clock is ticking away, so is the number of participants. As I see when I speak, it's now 219 and it's going on like a clock. So very exciting. At the outset, I must congratulate Mahavir and his team from COP if I pronounce it properly, Pentamod, in getting together, piecing together something which hitherto none of the VCs or webinars or video conference, etc., have attempted to do. Now, from a macro situation that we've been hearing over the last almost around 3 to 4 months since the time PLI scheme and the Pharma Park scheme was rolled out by the Honorable Minister of Chemical and Fertilizers, Shri Gavraji, and his team, Dr. Vaghela, who's now moved on to TRAI as chairperson. A lot has been stated, but none of the webinars have attempted to go into the micros as to what are these APIs, what are these KSMs, what are these intermediates, what's the way forward, why is it that we are where we are today? Rather than being the leader, like as we are in formulations, as a pharmacy to the world, supplying to 206 out of 215 countries at the last count. Why is it that we've been left out in APIs, KSMs, and intermediates? Why is it that our domestic industry, which is a robust $21 billion industry, right, which is staggering 150 lakh crores, is today on the verge of collapse if China was to pull the plug on us? So I think this is a great attempt in terms of analysis of all of this through the experts and great panelists that we have in here, as well as the short, the medium, and the long term of it as to what is it that we've lost out in the last 20 years, and how is it that we are going to gain it back in a considered manner in about next 5 years, if all goes well. Now, let me come to the first slide. My thoughts go back to 70s. Complete import dependence. Maybe Sudarshan will bear me out. We come from the same institute. He's 2 years seen it for me from IIM Ahmedabad, that in 70s or thereabouts when we passed out and, we got hooked into the MNCs of that point in time, there were hardly any domestic companies worth a mention. Everything was being imported, made be APIs, intermediates, KSMs, if at all, because formulations were being imported in our country. To the Uruguay round of talks where the then Prime Minister and the bureaucrats refused to sign on the dotted line. And I think that augured very well for the pharmaceutical industry. And we moved on, of not intended, but it happened just because it happened. There was a clarion call by the then Prime Minister and the bureaucrats. Everybody galvanized together and got the industry academia going without the intent. Now that's the amazing part of it, because there was this walleye cry from the forces that be at that point in time. And I think we owe it all to them at that point in time that we started on the right track and became the pharmacy to the world, as we state very proudly today, right? So from import dependence to mission dependence on dominance through chemistry, through clusters, and through the policy reforms. Last decade or so, I've been trying my very best in different dispositions, may it be Pharmexcel, may it be BDMA, IDMA, and very many other caps from a CII perspective, where I happen to be the chair of North. We tried everything under the sun to make sure that the policy intervention comes in and the government and the industry together, right, realize how vulnerable, no, please go back, don't change the slide. And we put our heads together to make sure that we go on to, yeah, thank you. We go on to become partially dependent on ourselves and move towards self-reliance. Nothing happened. It had to be Corona, which came in March. And suddenly everybody realized, oh my God, our formulation is going to take a hit if the APIs don't come in from the neighboring country. And that is where the logjam got broken, magic happened. We reached out very quickly to the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, the dynamic CEO and captain of our country. And then everybody, Niti Aayog, PMO, Department of Pharmaceuticals, Ministry of Health, and my ministry, Ministry of Commerce, right? They all got in the act. All of us, the stakeholders, got involved in one way or the other. Sudarshan, I, Dr. Ishwar Reddy, Dr. Somani, Honorable DCGI. We all put together a document, and you see the results today. And I'm very happy and excited to inform you that in this PLI scheme and in the Pharma Park schemes, amazing interest is there. As of now, as I understand, There are 12 states competing for 3 slots of pharma parks. That's incredible. Never happened in the history of this country. And then you have, of course, the PLI scheme, where I understand 120 companies have already put in the applications. And I understand that the number might well go beyond 500. Augurs very well for our country. So here we are, vibrant India. Yeah, we are a part of that, and very happy to know, realize, and excited to say that, from a defensive industry that we were, nobody wanted to invest. And Godaji will bear me out. This is defensive, forget about it. The share price is not going to move. Today, I think if there's one buzzing stock segment in the market, and that is pharma. Any day you put on CNBC, ET Now, whatever, is it IT, pharma, IT. Even this morning before I came in. So what has happened that suddenly pharma has become one of the most priority sectors because the government has accorded that status to our industry amongst the 5. So anything and everything which happens in this country, pharma is going to be the priority sector. I think this is beginning of good times for us. And this particular webinar comes in at an appropriate time. Once again, congratulations, Mahavir, for putting it all together. So what are the means? Make in India, PMJ, as you know, Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, Skill India, and Bharatiya Jan Aushadhi Pariyojana. I think these are all game changers. Ayushman Bharat is the biggest outlay of public funds for a country, right? Now, with all of this, we are in for a metamorphosis, and let's be prepared. Next slide, please. Could you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So some of the few summary slides. Major contributor of Indian exports, about $21 billion, roughed off from 20.6. Could have been better had the lockdown not happened in the last week. Silent champion of affordable healthcare in the world, immunization programs, increasing life expectancy in India as well as developing worlds. Indian domestic market is equally good, as I said earlier, $21.5 billion. National laboratories and public sector units are the ones which heralded success when we did not sign off on the dotted line in the Uruguay round talks. So we owe it everything to them, and a lot of entrepreneurs came out of IDPL and the likes of them. Post-liberalization, India still continues to import such basic drugs as anti-fever, paracetamol, metformin, anti-diabetes, and penicillins, of which we are the biggest in the world in terms of formulations. Next, please. So it's a dynamic coexistence of doing amazingly well in exports and still continuing to import the basic drugs, as I said. Next slide, please. So this slide, thanks to Sudarshan, he put it up together. I borrowed it from him. See, Indian pharmaceutical industries contributed very significantly to the economic activity of the country, and that's why we are a priority sector now. 36% lower per person disease burden, DALI as we call it, disability adjusted life years since 1947. No other country has done that. 100% eradication of polio, along with Rotary, of which I'm a member. 95% lower treatment costs of life-threatening diseases like Hep C and leukemia. I mean, look at the amount of value we've created by bringing it to 5% of the actual price in the regulated and highly developed markets. 2.7 million jobs created by the industry. $10 billion, additional rates like, yeah. So even globally, Indian pharmaceutical companies have contributed very significantly. 60% of the global vaccine production takes place in India, and you were the largest vaccine producing company in the World Serum Institute of India. And I have no doubts whatsoever, and hold me to it, that the first of the 3 vaccines which is going to come out of India is going to be from Indian. Bharat Biotech, my ex-company, Zydus Cadila, or of course, Serum Institute, which is in 2-way collaboration with Novavax and of course, Oxford. 90% of the WHO demand for measles vaccines is met out of India. 40 to 70% of WHO demand for DPT, diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis is met from India. 25% of UK medicines are made in India. 33% of the pills in US are consumed. Every 3rd pill and every 2nd injectable in the generic space, a large generic space in US, is from India. And 37% as of 2018, AIDS patients are receiving treatment from India, whereas it was 2% in 2009. The percentage has gone up significantly in 2018 to about 52%. Now that's the amazing value that India has created globally. Next slide, please. This slide again goes back to the vision to 2030, borrowed from IPA. You see, currently we have $42 billion. If you include APIs, it's $52 billion. We, even if we grow by 7 to 8% against the current backdrop of about 10%, we'll go up to $90 billion. until 2030. And if we grow at 11 to 12%, which is currently the scenario for sure, pre-COVID, we were growing at that rate, both in domestic and exports. Then you're coming to a staggering number of 120 to 130 billion dollars, which is comparable with China to an extent. China currently in the chemical space, formulations as well as APIs, KSMs, and intermediates is about 128 billion. Another 32 billion is basically Chinese. So, with this, our market share probably will increase from the current 4.4% to 8.4%. And what is the vision? Vision is to accelerate universal healthcare in India by access to highly affordable drugs. We are known for that. Nobody can match the price points, quality management, as well as accessibility point of view insofar as India is concerned. Emergence as an innovation leader, India has to emerge as an innovation leader with aim of launching 3 to 4 new molecular entities and maybe one new biological entity, NBE as we call it, with 10 to 15% incremental innovation, 505(b)(2), sustained release and stuff of that nature by 2030. Largest and the most reliable drug supplier with 120 to 130 billion dollars is said. And contribution to the growth of the Indian economy, contribute foreign exchange staggering. Just look at the number from current 10 to 11 billion dollars to 30 to 40 billion dollars by 2030, and almost around another $2 million in the process by 2030. Next slide, please. So what are the opportunities by which we will get to that coveted figure of $132 billion? There's a patent cliff opportunity worth around $251 billion until 24. And who else can capitalize on this? India, nobody else, because if it's generics, it's India. It works that way. And get the footprints in largely underpenetrated international market like Japan, South Korea, Africa, Indonesia, Latin America, and if the situation normalizes, and pray and hope it does, then China. We are basically not even 1% of the total market of China. It's a great opportunity, whereas they export 2.8 billion worth of bulk pharma, KSMs, intermediates. We do hardly anything, couple of millions. State-sponsored programs to enable the universal healthcare, Ayushman Bharat, as I said earlier, is definitely a game changer. No two ways about that. 40% of the Indian population will have access to the new Ayushman Bharat Yojana post-COVID. Newer products such as gene therapy, CAR-T, biosimilars, and specialty. I think a few companies, 10 companies, which I count on my fingers, are the ones who are doing it, but we need to do. Our 20,000 companies, even if 1,000 companies were to get into this space, you would be another behemoth of the biotechnology drugs. Next slide, please. So this is what the pharma industry is in all, 42 vertically divided, 50-15 to 21-21, growing at about 10% year on year. Next slide, please. Now, in the therapy areas, anti-infective continues to be the largest of the entire bit that we have. Unfortunately, degrowing during COVID, because that's good, but bad for the companies like myself who make anti-infectives. People are not moving out much. There are no accidents. Corona has kind of diluted every other infection for that matter. So anti-infectives still continues to be number one, but degrowing at about 11%. Cardiac, gastro, anti-diabetics, vitamins, respiratory, so on and so forth, vaccines. But the devil lies in the details. All of this is fine, but when you go to things like oncology, although the prescription is 2%, the value that they create is incredible, 50% of the total volume of prescriptions which are generated all over the world as well as India. Next slide, please. Okay, now I'll end up by saying that this was a curtain raiser to let you know as to where we stand both in India as well as globally. We are at a stage where we were vulnerably were dependent on our neighboring country because they account for 95% of the domestic industry in terms of the imports, and our formulation industry would collapse if something was to go wrong, some disruption was to happen in the supply chain vis-a-vis China. So with that backdrop, is PLI enough? Question number one. Question number 2 is pharma parks with a gestation period of 2 years. Is it going to help matters? Is it going to take us to Atmanirbharta, self-reliance, in the space of about 5 years? And what is it, technologically speaking, and Yogin Bhai would be the best man to answer that, right? As to which chemistries do we go in for? Is it the green chemistry, flow chemistry, and whole host fluorinated, what are the chemistries and how do we get there? My last sentence is that there is so much of depth, both horizontally and vertically, which is sitting in our academia, which has never been exploited. Academia, unfortunately, until about a year and a half ago, has been working in isolation in ivory towers, trying to get their patents, trying to get their latent publications and so on and so forth. And the industry has not benefited. Godaji will bear me out. I mean, he would have 1,000 odd people in R&D. I have about 300. Why should we do that? You go to Eli Lilly, you go to Merck, you go to all the innovators, right? 90% of their work actually happens outside of their R&D laboratories, and the entire innovation comes in from there. Look at China. Forget about everybody else. China, they do such a lot of outsourcing, right? I'm leaving you with the thoughts and leave it to the highly distinguished panelists to reflect on that and make sure that we get to the objectives of what this